Before I actually begin today's lesson, which is how God works through us, I wanted to pick up where I left off last lesson, which was February 10th, when I shared my experience of going to the Landmark Forum. And I had talked about how the Landmark Forum was a transformational learning experience rather than an informational learning experience. And that based on what I had experienced, I felt that it was a very healing, an opportunity to connect human to human without all the judgments and evaluations in between, that it was an experience of going heart to heart and being very present with the beingness of each individual that was in that forum. And I want to let you know I had asked folks if they would fill out a registration form because I intended to bring Landmark Forum here to Chico for each one of us to experience that. Thanks to 32 of you filling out the registration form, I was able to negotiate with Landmark. And instead of them bringing the forum, we're going to bring a specific Landmark seminar here, specifically to heal together from the campfire. In other words, they are going to bring people knowing what this community has experienced and focusing the seminar for each of us to share that healing together, for resilience, for recovery, and to have an opportunity to bond and know that that healing is happening as a community together as we move forward. So, yes. You know, we talk about the power of our word, and just by throwing that out there, it was amazing the number of things that happened and continued to happen. Christine Rowe, who's somebody I actually knew previously, happened to be here with us that day, and she's a grant writer. And I told her she was God in action, a godsend. And so we have already met, and I have some follow-up work to do, but we will be writing a grant. I have also done some research for the North Valley Community Fund, which many of you know has lots of funding for the campfire. And we may have to add to some of the funding that they're willing to give, meaning maybe perhaps a GoFundMe or some other ways to raise some funds. But essentially, things are in the works, and it's going to happen. And what I love is it'll happen, I was hoping shortly after Easter. Why? Rise up. Rise up like the phoenix. Yeah.
Are we advertising throughout the community about this?
I will once I have a date and a time. Yep. And I can have a good description of what our outcomes and what this opportunity is. Yep. And I intend to have at least 125 people because that's what this building can hold. So already I've planted in mind the day paradise met hell, November 8th, 2018. And the day paradise met the heavenly transformation, the day we bring Landmark here together. Yeah. So the campfire, I mentioned the campfire holistic healing services. We continue to perfect that and make that available, again, every second and fourth Sunday. We also had a pet grief workshop here. And I continue to go to many of the meetings in Chico, and thank you to Sharon Sauls, because when I can't make it, Sharon has been to many of those meetings and connecting with other faith leaders, nonprofit organizations who are all engaged in there are needs and there are people who are willing to fill needs, and we're looking to make, connect those so that there are no gaps. So it's been great, and thank you for your love and support, and I look forward again to continuing this engagement. And thanks to Sharon for many of her thoughts and input in helping support many folks who have been through the campfire. So I move now to, the title is How God Works Through Us. And the Centers for Spiritual Living around the world are using a common set of annual themes and monthly themes, as well as the lesson for today. Now, for many of us, how many of us were actually raised in a traditional faith. Wow, almost everybody in the room, right? And how is God different? How is the image of God different with you today versus what you were taught? Okay, how? It is within rather than without. What else? Spiritual, non-judgmental. Always says yes. There are so many messages about the universe always saying yes. It's a power, not a person. I like that one, Lisa. It is love, living and expressing through each one of us. It is inclusive. Beautiful. Yes. Say that again. Less fear generating, which means if you're really in love, there is no fear. Yes. In everywhere and in everything and all powerful. Infinite. Infinite power. Infinite. Yes. There is no death. A reflection of you. Beautiful. So yes, Sharon? Yes, you are a reflection of, I am, it's the words, I am a reflection of it. So, have things changed in your lifetime? For some. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with the traditional faith. Anything that brings us closer to the center of our being, the truth of our being, is all divine. But yes, we tended to learn that God was a deity outside of us. And then it makes it difficult to imagine that there is a God working through us if that's how you think about God. So I like to use the word spirit, but I had challenged all of you in January to find whatever you wanted to call God that made you feel close to it. Do you remember that? How many have been using that? Okay, some people have forgotten. And that's okay. And what I want to say is I asked people to choose a new word for God that felt close. Mine's beloved. And I know there were many, Crystal, what was yours? Fluffy goodness. And it is so you, Crystal. So you. I love that. I love that. So be bold and figure out what your name for God is. But I'm going to use spirit and God, together. But the word spirit to me represents more of an energy, and it's easier to imagine that energy working through us. Does that make sense? So now, things have changed a lot about what we all understand in society about spirit, about contemporary metaphysics, how energy moves through us. So I have a couple quotes here from a woman named Gabriella Roth. Energy moves in waves. Waves move in patterns. Patterns move in rhythms. A human being is just that. Energy, waves, patterns, rhythms. Nothing more, nothing less. A dance. And Eckhart Tolle says consciousness is a vast ocean, and thinking is the waves and the ripples on the surface of the ocean. He also says, in a fully functional organism, an emotion has a very short lifespan. It is like a momentary ripple or wave on the surface of your being. In other words, there's a lot more depth there. Fiona Apple says, I have only one thing to do, and that's to be the wave that I am, and then sink back into the ocean. How about Albert Einstein? An ocean traveler has even more vividly the impression that the ocean is made of waves more than it is made of water. That's when you let your mind chatter just do this to you, right? And lastly, Alan Watts. You and I are all as much continuous with the physical universe as a wave is continuous with the ocean. So some nice ways from some contemporary metaphysicians thinking about how God moves through us, how spirit moves through us. So, well, what is this spirit moving and working through us? Well, Science of Mind and Dr. Ernest Holmes tells it is love and law. Now, I know with law that may get people into thinking judgment. But when we're talking law, we're talking law of gravity. In other words, we're all used to knowing how the law of gravity works. And there are natural laws, spiritual laws, that also work. And our job is to learn how to work those. How many remember first starting to ride a bike? Did you get to experience a different form of gravity? But eventually, you get into the feeling the rhythm, the flow, and then you're riding. And you know what? You never forget how to ride, even if you haven't ridden for 20 years. Isn't that fascinating? And I used to skateboard. Matter of fact, anybody remember those marchathons? I actually skateboarded through one of the marchathons. Probably wasn't what they expected, but 25 miles was a long ways. Same thing with the skateboard. It's not exactly the same as riding the bike, but once you understand how to use the law of gravity when you're on the skateboard, you see what people do with that now, right? The Olympics. Whoa! Ugh, right? Wow. Talk about knowing how to leverage the law of gravity. And so it is with you in the spiritual laws, practicing to leverage the laws of the universe to be who you are meant to be, a divine and fulfilling life. Spirit is also a creative intelligence and that deep abiding love that lives at the subatomic level. You know, scientists are going to discover at some point something, and they're not going to call it love, but that's what it is. And we're guided by this creative intelligence no matter where we are. And when we align ourselves with truth, then we find our true power. Because we're aligned. You know, if you're off balance, don't have quite the amount of power than when you are balanced and in alignment. Frequently, though, we tell ourselves and others false stories embellished by our human ego. As Reverend Christine said last week, edging God out. Ego. Our mind is indeed creative. Just listen to your stories. Because we actually take facts or things that are just there or happen, and we weave our story around that. This is our habit. A habit we perhaps need to kick. Many of you are carrying the story of what happened to you 20 years ago. But what happened is gone. It's not here anymore. However, while the event is no more, we continue to tell the story which carries our emotions from your past into your present, and therefore taints the possibilities of your future, because you project the fear or the injury of what happened in the past forward. We're learning a whole lot more about PTSD these days, yes? You know, I'd say the last 10 years, a lot more published about what that is, what that means, and neuroscience expressing why and how that works. And that's why it's important to do a spiritual practice so that you can bring yourself back to being centered and aligned with truth, the truth of your being, what you are right here, right now. But we tend to, you know, judge what we hear and what we see almost immediately, which is not really a deep listening. We don't typically stand back to contemplate. We are already making quick evaluations and judgments as we have our experiences. And Reverend Christine, I liked what she said last week also about Byron Katie's 3 businesses: your business, my business, and God's business. And we love to intertwine all of those to create our own little soap opera. But if we can continue to move ourselves back to our center, back to our truth of our wholeness, our perfection, we open up to so many other possibilities. And this is why meditation and spiritual practice is very powerful, although it requires a discipline. So if you have a little kid inside you who doesn't like to be disciplined, or an adult who doesn't like to be disciplined, moving yourself into the discipline for meditation takes practice, just like riding a bike. And all I can do is tell you that when you practice meditation and you get better and better and better at it, you become a lot more aware of the stories you are telling yourself. That mind chatter, like in the book, The Untethered Soul, that roommate that you never chose, but is always chattering in your mind and always with you, that you start having an awareness that differentiates itself from the stories you're telling yourself. And that's very powerful. Let me give you an example. How many of you have already seen the movie The Green Book? Okay, it won many awards, highly recommend it. In the Green Book movie, a driver who is from New York is driving a black African-American prodigy of many sorts, but particularly of music, through the South. And the driver chatters and chatters and chatters and chatters and chatters. And Don Shirley, who is the gentleman, real life story, who's in the back being driven through the South, has a presence about him and speaks to, he doesn't say being present, but having the dignity of self. And he even tries to tell the driver, can you please stop chattering? And he's, oh, my wife always tells me to stop chattering, you know, when I go to bed at night. Unaware, unconscious. It's funny because it's us, right? We unconsciously move through our life just like the mind chatter, buying into the mind chatter, buying into the stories that we're creating for ourselves, which tend to have false beliefs wrapped in them. So in practicing meditation, you begin to develop that recognition of, oh yeah, this is my story, this is my chatter, but what do I know about the truth of my being? And you all said it here when I asked, what is God to you now? What is Spirit to you now? This month's topic for all the Centers for Spiritual Living is be truthful in facts and motives. If we don't become conscious of those thoughts, then we don't align ourselves to the truth. Facts are facts, but we weave these false beliefs in between all those facts and then stir up those things that need to be healed. You need to be healed when you know that there is more to be known, as in a greater truth. So whether it's relationship, finances, job, health, when things get off, when the physical aspect of life is not working, it's an effect, not a cause. The cause is some false belief. And when you align with Spirit, you move yourself into a greater truth to be revealed through you. New possibilities arise, but that means you have to be okay with change. No matter what is happening to you, through you, Spirit is always, always, always there with you and for you. No exception. So how can God be in being laid off on a job or being sick? We judge that change, that movement in the wave as that's not good. But is it? Good happens, bad happens. And we never really know. How many of you had something in your life you thought was bad, and later you realized it was a pretty good thing it happened? Anybody experience that? Okay, why can't we bring that into the present moment when life is moving us around, when the wave comes to move us to know a greater truth? So, what do I know to be the truth? It does mean learning to listen without judging. Being able to observe what's actually happening in the physical domain, and then reflecting and saying what is happening in my chatter, in my mind, in my awareness. Spirit may be whispering to you, but if you're in prayer and you don't feel like you've had a response, you have to ask yourself, have I stopped talking long enough for Spirit to tell me? Will I hear it? In the book Love and Law, the unpublished teachings of Ernest Holmes, our founder of Science of Mind, he says, all your work begins and ends in our consciousness, because that's all there is. So, as Ernest Holmes also says, I want you to think of yourself as in this mind with a capital M, in this consciousness. And don't think of mind as being in you. Rather, think of yourself as a center in this mind. Of course, this mind flows through you, but think of yourself as a center in it. We are surrounded by a psychic life, a subjective, creative, conscious, receptive, neutral, meaning non-judgmental, and plastic moldable force, which receives the impress of our thought always and has no alternative. Meaning the universe doesn't argue with you, it always says yes. And even scientifically, scientists have tried to define the mind as a product of a brain activity. The brain as a physical substance, and the mind being a conscious product of the firing neurons in our brain. However, growing evidence shows that the mind goes far beyond the physical workings of the brain and body. They can't move your consciousness into a different body or brain. Okay, I'm going to mix it up a little bit now. How many of you are students? How many of you are teachers? Okay, most of you got this, but in case you didn't, how many of you are students of life? Well, that means you have to learn your life's lessons. And how many of you are teachers of life? Meaning you teach others through your life lessons. So you are students and teachers in this community with one another as one. One Center for Spiritual Living. Who are you willing to learn from? Have you ever asked yourself that? Some of us as parents sometimes forget we could learn a lot from our children. Yeah, we always see it demonstrated up here, don't we? When they simplify the lessons. And who are you willing to teach? I say that because we take for granted that, oh yeah, I'll learn and teach anybody. But then sometimes people show up in your life and you don't really like the wrinkle they're bringing. And you say, I don't want to learn from this one. We're a center for spiritual living because you are all at the center, at our center. So I'm going to ask you to take a minute quietly for yourself and ask yourself this question. How does Spirit work through you? All right, now you all will have to wake up because what I'm going to do now is ask you to not share with your partner, spouse, but find somebody else and share how is it that Spirit or God works through you. Ready? Go. Turn to somebody in front of you, back to you, left of you, right of you. And it can be 2 or 3 people. Just find somebody, find a group. Janine. Go back there. Sit with those. Share anybody's secret, but in general, how does Spirit work through anybody? What was the expression? Creativity? Kindness.
It's a guide through life.
It's a guide through life. That's how Spirit works through you, guiding you through life. It wasn't personal.
But it was.
It's a flow. That's very nice when you think about the wave, right? It's a flow. It's the force.
Singing in the choir.
Singing in the choir, beautiful. Yeah. How does God work through you? Through your voice, sharing the beauty of music. Yes.
Responding with love.
Responding with love. Reflection.
Opening to it.
Opening to it. That's great. Say that again, Emmett?
How can I be of service?
How can you be of service? So serving, that's how God works through you. Janine? That's all right. I distracted you. I'm sorry. It'll come back.
When I said that wasn't me, it was my teacher. Allowed me to see.
Yes. Your teacher allowed you to see the reflection. So, you know, like the little soul in the sun, I am the light, and I want to experience myself as the light. Well, in order to experience yourself as the light, you're going to have to go into the darkness. Yeah. To experience yourself as the light. And each of you have a unique set of gifts to offer. And whatever those gifts are, shine your light, because that's how God works through you. Whatever you're passionate about, whatever you know, this just causes the flow to happen. The practice of being your authentic self is how Spirit works through you. I have had, in the year 2004, my sister passed away, and I had done a particular workshop. That's why it sticks through me. And I made up a hero called I Am an Inspirator. I know that's not a word. I made it a big light bulb and said, I inspire. That is how Spirit works through me. But how does Spirit work through you? It may be empowering people. It may be in service of people. It may be the gifts that you have that you offer to one another. And when you align with that, laser focused power, things will come into alignment in your life. When you know who you are, when you know what your gift is, and you align yourself to that, which may take a little discovery. And you know, sometimes we discover new things about ourselves, right? Teacher and student. I do have to say that when we get old, we start thinking we know more. I can't tell you how many times I've recognized since going to the forum, people go, I know, yeah, I know, yeah, I know, I know. You're cutting off all the possibilities of what you don't know you don't know. So I've tried to correct myself a lot, especially with my partner. No, I don't know. Right? Special giggle. So, Spirit is the love of who you are, and love must be embodied and exemplified through you. Contemplated and demonstrated through you. We could say God is peace, power, beauty, joy, life, light, but if we never express that to see it, it's there, it's the truth, but you are the demonstration of all of those characteristics of God. So be it. Your spirit in action, and that's the Centers for Spiritual Living. Our 2019 theme is spirituality in action. You are spirit in action. It's one thing to sit with knowledge of a faith or a philosophy and be able to speak about it, but it's a different thing to live it and to demonstrate it, to actually walk the talk and experience life as spirituality in action. The real purpose of any faith is to actually exercise spiritual principles in your own life. So be in alignment with your highest potential by experiencing your connection to Spirit. To live authentically, to live a fulfilling life by living your life's purpose to the highest degree possible. And so it is. Namaste.